"You're not supposed to be here." The voice wasn't precisely a voice. It resonated, more like a hum felt in Kale's bones, a low thrumming that vibrated through the grimy plating he was trying to pry loose. He froze, his hand hovering over the rusted latch. The derelict station groaned around him, a symphony of decay and void chill, every creak and shudder amplified in the silence. He listened, straining his ears, but the sound didn't come through the atmospheric processors or the thin, whistling drafts sighing through breached sections. It was internal, originating somewhere behind him, closer than seemed possible in the seemingly empty corridor. It was a sound that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to the marrow. Slowly, Kale turned, his scav tool held ready, its edge glinting faintly in the focused beam of his helmet lamp. The corridor was empty, just peeling paint, exposed conduits shedding brittle insulation, and the endless, silent void outside a cracked viewport, a smear of distant stars like frozen tears. He swept the light along the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Nothing. Just debris, dust motes dancing in the beam, and shadows clinging to the corners like unwelcome guests. "Who's there?" His own voice sounded harsh and loud, a flat, crude noise against the profound silence, the echo swallowed instantly by the vastness around them. The humming returned, stronger this time, more insistent, accompanied by a faint, sweet scent that shouldn't be here, a scent like ozone and flowering moss after rain, complex and undeniably organic. It prickled his senses, not unpleasantly, but with an alien intensity that put every nerve on alert, raising the fine hairs on his arms. Then, a shimmer. Not light, but a distortion in the light, as if the air itself was twisting, warping reality. It coalesced near a shadowed alcove further down the corridor, resolving slowly into a shape that defied easy description, a being that seemed woven from shadow and light. It was female. He registered that instantly in the universal language of posture and form, even though the form itself was utterly alien, wrapped in some sort of dark, flexible material that seemed to absorb light. But it was her skin, for lack of a better term, that drew his eye, making his breath catch in his chest. Bioluminescent lines, impossibly fine and vibrant, traced intricate, ever-shifting patterns across her visible surfaces, arms, neck, the delicate planes of her face, swirling and flowing with an internal light that pulsed gently, independently of his helmet lamp. The lines were deep, vibrant blues and purples, occasionally flaring to a sharp, almost painful white before softening again, a language written in living light he could not read. As he watched, the patterns on her exposed cheeks intensified, the blue deepening to indigo, the edges sharpening into geometric precision. He felt the scent intensify too, a subtle shift in its chemical signature that his primitive human brain interpreted wildly as annoyance, warning, a territorial display in olfactory form. "This territory is claimed." The resonant hum vibrated directly in his skull now, clear and sharp despite having no discernible source in the air. It felt less like hearing, more like being telepathically nudged, a thought placed directly into his mind. Kale lowered his tool slightly but didn't relax his stance. His hand still gripped the salvaged energy pistol hidden beneath his jacket. "Claimed? By who? This station's been dead for cycles. I checked the manifests, the sector reports. Empty derelict, just dust and ghosts." The shifting lights on her form flared briefly to that sharp white again, a blinding flash that made him blink. By those who came before, by those who waited, by those whose resonance remains. Waited for what? For me to haul off enough scrap to fill my hold and pay for fuel. He tried for humor, a defense mechanism he'd honed over years of hard living, but it felt weak and hollow against the sheer, unnerving presence she radiated. The scent was growing stronger, more complex, layered with something new and unsettlingly familiar, like the faint metallic tang of spilled blood mixed with that strange floral note, a predatory sweetness. "You disrupt the stillness. The stillness is necessary for the reintegration." Her resonant voice deepened, and he felt a faint pressure behind his eyes, a dull ache starting in his temples. The glowing lines on her limbs pulsed faster, a frantic, almost anxious rhythm. Cale took a careful step back, his boots scraping softly on the deck plating. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm just a scavenger, trying to make a living. Point me away from your waiting place and I'll leave. Pronto, no hard feelings." She didn't move, but the shimmer around her seemed to intensify, making the edges of her form waver, blurring the already indistinct lines. It was like looking at a heat haze, but in the deep cold of space. The intricate patterns on her face shifted again, the indigo lines blurring and softening into a gentle, undulating green around her wide, dark eyes. Or whatever passed for them, he couldn't quite make out distinct features in the swirling play of light. The change in pattern, the sudden shift in scent, from annoyance warning to something softer, less defined, but still intensely felt, was a language he couldn't read with his mind, but felt viscerally in his gut. It was like a sudden emotional landscape opening up, overwhelming his human senses with its raw, alien complexity. He felt a weird, almost painful pull in his chest, a dizzying sense of something vast and unknowable trying to communicate on a level beyond words, beyond thought. The air thickened around him, heavy with the scent and the resonant hum pressing in, making it hard to breathe. His breath hitched. This wasn't just an alien, this was a force, a being of intense, palpable energy, radiating on multiple frequencies he was only dimly aware of. He was profoundly, terrifyingly alone with it in the silent, dead station. He felt a sudden, primal urge to flee, to turn and run back to the relative safety of his ship, the rust bucket, and jettison into the void, leaving this impossible creature and its claim behind, erasing the encounter from his memory. But his feet felt rooted to the spot, caught by an unseen current of that strange, resonant energy and the disorienting beauty of her shifting, glowing form. The tension in the corridor wasn't just physical, the standoff between two beings in a confined space. It was sensory, emotional, energetic, a clash of utterly alien natures compressed into a single breathless moment. He could feel the subtle vibrations she emitted, the way they interacted with the dead metal of the station, with the very air he breathed, with the tiny, contained chaos of his own being. It was like standing too close to a generator running on pure feeling, on raw existence. And then the green patterns on her face sharpened again, resolving into distinct geometric shapes, intricate and complex, and the scent shifted one more time, adding a layer of curiosity, interest, observation. The sheer alienness of the communication, the raw, exposed emotional shifts happening on her skin, in the air, in his mind, was overwhelming. He had scavenged countless derelicts, faced automated defenses and desperate squatters and even the occasional rival scavenger, but nothing had prepared him for this. His sarcastic retort died in his throat, replaced by a profound, disorienting awe and a tremor of something else entirely, a strange, unsettling attraction born of sheer, terrifying novelty and the raw power she exuded. He hadn't expected this. Not here. Not ever. This wasn't just a job gone wrong. It was an encounter that felt like it was rearranging the very fabric of his reality. He was a simple man, living a simple, hard life. She was something else, something vast and ancient and intensely alive. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint creak of the station settling in the deep cold, the distant sigh of stressed metal. Cale's lamp beam trembled slightly in his hand, reflecting the tremor in his own body. Her glowing patterns had settled, the green lines on her face sharp and intricate, the blue-purple tracing her limbs a slow, steady pulse, like a deep, slow heartbeat. The resonant hum softened, became less of a pressure and more of a continuous presence in his awareness, a subtle undercurrent to his own thoughts. He still couldn't see distinct features, no mouth or eyes in a way he understood, but the patterns on her face seemed focused on him, analyzing, assessing, probing. The air still carried that complex alien scent, less overwhelming now but still rich and strange. It was like breathing in a foreign emotion, a foreign state of being. "You are small," the resonant thought voice stated, not as an insult, just an observation, flat and factual. The green patterns on her face rippled like water, like a surface disturbed by a stone. "And you carry the mark of many disruptions, Scars, yes, both outside and within your contained field. Cale felt a defensive prickle, a tightening in his chest. He was small compared to what? Her species, the station. And how could she possibly sense his scars, the ones beneath his layers of synth leather and hardened plating, the ones deeper inside that he kept locked away behind walls he'd spent years building? What's it to you? He snapped back, his voice rough, falling back on the familiar armor of aggression. Yeah, I got marks. Surviving out here leaves them. Takes pieces, too. Her form shimmered slightly again, a subtle ripple in the air, and the scent shifted, gaining a note of understanding, recognition, empathy. The green patterns on her face flowed, blurring and softening into a gentle, undulating line, a wave of light. Survival requires adaptation. Adaptation creates marks. Resonance shifts, reforms around the disruption. It wasn't just acknowledging his statement. It felt like a fundamental truth of her own existence, a shared understanding of existence in a harsh universe. The stillness here was meant to be absolute, for the final stages of reintegration. Your presence disrupts it, creates unintended resonance. Yeah, well, sorry to mess up your meditation session, Cale muttered, feeling a familiar surge of cynical defiance. But this is a salvage operation. My operation. Found it first. By the laws of the sector, that makes it mine. The green patterns on her face flared, sharp and defined again like fractured crystals. He felt a brief, intense spike of that earlier annoyance warning pheromone, a sharp chemical jolt. It was like being doused in cold water, a visceral rejection. Finding does not grant ownership, human. Claiming requires resonance. You do not resonate with this place, only with your grasping and your internal storms. Resonance? What are you talking about? Cale scoffed, trying to ground himself in familiar reality, but the humming presence in his mind, the unsettling scent, the glowing alien before him, they all combined to create a reality far stranger than any salvage manifest, any sector law. It's a hunk of metal and dead systems. A tomb. You resonate with scrap metal, with ghosts. Her form seemed to lean forward slightly, and the air crackled with a low-level energy that made the fine hairs on Cale's arms stand up, a static charge building around them. The blue-purple patterns on her limbs began to pulse faster, the light brightening, the rhythm accelerating. This place is a vessel, a shell of power. It holds echoes of its creators. It is sacred ground. You profane it with your crude intrusions, your grasping. Profane, sacred. Look, lady, it's just a station, a derelict. I'm just trying to make a living, a hard one, believe me. He felt a flicker of genuine frustration, a desperate edge to his voice. He needed this score. His ship was running low on fuel, his stores were depleted, and the last few derelicts had yielded nothing but dust and disappointment. This station looked promising, large and relatively intact, abandoned mid-voyage judging by the limited damage, potentially full of valuable tech. Your living disturbs the rest. Her resonant voice was sharp now, the pressure behind Cale's eyes increasing, becoming a throbbing ache that made him wince. He felt a sudden, acute discomfort, a disorientation that went beyond physical pain. Leave now, before the disturbance becomes irreversible, before the resonance here rejects your intrusion entirely. The blue-purple pulsing accelerated, became a rapid, almost strobe-like flicker, and the scent spiked again. A sharp, metallic odor mixed with the floral, undeniably aggressive and repellent this time. It felt like a physical push against his mind, against his will, a forceful expulsion. Cale stumbled back a step, raising a hand to his head, trying to shield himself from the disorienting pressure. All right, I'm going, geez. He didn't wait, didn't argue further, turning sharply and hurrying back the way he came, his scav tool forgotten for a moment, clattering against the deck plating as he fumbled with it. He could still feel her presence behind him, the resonant hum fading but still there, a watchful weight in the silence, a lingering pressure in his skull. The strange scent clung to him, seemed to have seeped into his clothes, into his very pores. He needed to get back to the rust bucket, launch, and figure out what the hell he'd just encountered. This wasn't worth it, not even for a full hold of salvage. He reached the airlock corridor, fumbling with the controls, his hands shaking slightly, his breath ragged. The outer door cycled open with a hiss, revealing the familiar, cramped interior of his ship's airlock, a welcome sight after the alien encounter. He scrambled inside, hitting the internal seal button with unnecessary force, needing the physical action to ground himself. The inner door hissed shut behind him, sealing him inside the relative safety of his own vessel. He leaned against it, trying to steady his breathing, the scent still clinging to him, the resonant hum still a faint echo in his skull, a phantom presence. That was too close. Way too close. He pushed himself away from the door and headed for the cockpit, intending to immediately spool up the drive core, get out of orbit, and jump to the nearest safe sector. But as he passed the small cargo bay, a sound made him stop dead in his tracks. A soft thud, followed by a faint scrape, a muffled groan. It came from inside his ship. Not good. Definitely not good. He drew his sidearm, a battered energy pistol he kept on his belt, and moved cautiously towards the cargo bay hatch, his heart hammering against his ribs like a drum solo. Had she followed him? How? He hadn't seen anybody enter the airlock with him. The humming presence was still faintly there, but it was different now, closer, more contained, less vast. He reached the cargo bay door, listening intently, straining his ears over the low thrum of the rustbucket's basic life support systems which had remained active. Silence, just the hum. He cautiously pushed the hatch open, pistol raised, sweeping the dim interior with his helmet lamp. The small bay was dim, cluttered with his meager supplies and tools, empty crates, coiled cables, spare parts. He swept his lamp around. Empty. Nothing seemed disturbed. He let out a shaky breath, lowering the pistol slightly. Maybe he was just jumpy. The alien encounter had rattled him more than he liked to admit. He started to turn away to continue towards the cockpit, but then a soft groan, a low, pained sound that vibrated in his skull like her voice but held a different resonance, a different frequency, reached him. It came from behind a stack of environmental suits he kept near the far bulkhead. He tensed again, raising the pistol, his knuckles white. Slowly he edged around the suits, his lamp beam cutting through the gloom, his heart pounding. She was there. The glowing alien, lying on the deck plating, curled slightly on her side, clutching at her chest. The intricate, vibrant patterns on her form were dimmed, flickered weakly, some areas almost dark, the blues and greens replaced by a dull, pulsing white, the universal color of distress. The resonant hum was a low, pained vibration, barely audible, a fragile thread in the silence. The rich, complex scent was still present, but now laced with an unmistakable note of distress, of injury, of fundamental disruption. He stared, stunned, the pistol forgotten in his hand. How had she gotten in? Had she clung to the hull, phased through the walls, teleported? His initial fear warred with a sudden surge of something else, something akin to pity perhaps, or just the shock of seeing such a powerful, otherworldly being reduced to this state. She seemed hurt, vulnerable. And she was inside his ship, trapped with him. The space felt impossibly small now, the air thick with her distress scent and the dim, flickering light of her pain. He was supposed to be getting away from her, from this whole strange, dangerous situation. Instead, he'd brought it on board. Great. Just great. His hand tightened on the pistol, but he didn't point it directly at her. The glowing patterns on her skin pulsed feebly, a silent, agonizing language he still couldn't comprehend, but whose meaning felt tragically clear in the confined space. She was in pain, and she was in his home. His solitary, predictable world had just been invaded by the unpredictable and the profoundly alien. Cale lowered the pistol completely, though he didn't holster it. He just held it loosely at his side, watching the alien woman curled on his cargo bay floor. Her glowing patterns were fading further, the vibrant blues and greens replaced by dull, intermittent flashes of a sickly, pale yellow like dying embers. The resonant hum in his skull was weaker now, a fragile thread of sound, a whimper. The air smelled sharp, almost acrid, with that note of distress dominating the complex floral undertones, overwhelming the usual smells of oil and metal. "Hey," his voice was softer this time, less defensive, stripped of its usual edge. "What happened? What did you do?" She didn't respond immediately, her form trembling slightly. The yellow flashes on her skin seemed to spike with the tremor like small electrical shocks running beneath the surface. Then the faint hum returned, tinged with a profound weariness, a deep exhaustion. The resonance, it binds to the vessel, disrupting it, separating forcefully. It fractures. Fractures, he frowned. What does that mean? You got hurt leaving the station, because I left. The implication hung heavy in the air. His actions had consequences he hadn't anticipated. A weak pulse of dim blue ran along one of her visible arms like a fragile vein of light. The departure from the vessel, it resisted, violently, its core resonance. It was integrated with my own, a necessary function for the final stages of reintegration, leaving prematurely, tearing free. It forced a separation at a fundamental level. It tears at the core. Tethered to the dead station. Integrated. Kale crouched down a few feet away, keeping a safe distance, still wary, but the raw vulnerability she displayed was disarming. Tethered how? You were like connected to it, its power core. She shifted, unfolding slightly, the dark material of her covering shifting like liquid shadow. He got a better look at her now, though the dim, shifting light made it hard to make out fine detail. Where the glowing patterns weren't, her skin seemed translucent or somehow not quite solid, giving an impression of fragility. Her face was angled away from him, but the yellow patterns flickered across the curve of her cheekbone, a silent language of pain. My essence, my core resonance. It resonated with its power core, a necessary function for the final stage of my process, leaving prematurely, tearing free. It forced a violent separation. It tears at the core, the energy dispersal. It is debilitating. Kale felt a cold knot form in his stomach, tighter this time. This wasn't just an alien with weird tech or abilities. She was intrinsically, fundamentally tied to that derelict station, to its core. And he, with his scavenger's greed, his need for salvage, had pulled her away from it, disrupted her essential process. His scavenging, his grasping, as she called it, had hurt her, directly. I didn't know, I just thought you were some squatter protecting her turf. A weak ripple of green crossed the back of her neck, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the scent, back towards that earlier note of understanding, recognition, forgiveness. You could not know, Kale, your resonance is contained, focused on tangible things, on physical reality. You perceive the world through different filters. Yeah, well, tangible things keep me alive, Kale said, the sarcasm returning, a shield against the weird guilt creeping in, against the sudden, unwanted weight of responsibility. What do you need? Is there anything I can do? I'm a scavenger, not a medic, alien or otherwise. He felt absurd asking. He was a human scavenger, his skills focused on mechanics and navigation and avoiding trouble. She was. Whatever she was, a being of resonance and light, tied to dead space stations by invisible bonds. His toolkit wasn't equipped for this kind of damage. She pushed herself up slightly, propping herself on an elbow. The movement seemed to cost her, a visible tremor running through her form. More yellow flickered, faster now, more intensely. I need reintegration with the vessel to mend the tear, or deep isolation to heal the fracture in my own core field. Reintegration back to the station, Kale asked, frowning. That's not happening. I'm getting out of here, soon as I check the ship and spool up the drives. The faint hum in his head gained a sharper, more insistent edge. Then isolation, a place where the external resonance is minimal, where my own core can reestablish its field, realign its frequencies. She looked at him then, her face turning towards him, the green patterns around her eyes intensifying slightly, becoming clearer, more focused, more analytical. He could see the intensity in their light, even through her apparent pain. This vessel, it pulses with your own contained resonance. Your life field, your consciousness, it interferes with my attempts at isolation. It is loud. Kale blinked, trying to process this. His ship, his rust bucket, interfered with her healing. My ship, it's just a rust bucket, a pile of salvaged parts, not exactly high-tech, barely holds together. High-tech is irrelevant. Her resonant voice was stronger now, though still weak, still tinged with exhaustion. Your life field, your metabolic processes, your thoughts, your emotions, they are loud to my disrupted state, a symphony of constant, contained turbulence. I need, avoid, absolute minimal resonance or something quieter, much quieter. Avoid, he had plenty of that outside, but he couldn't just space her, not even if she was weird and had just threatened him and then hitchhiked onto his ship. He wasn't that guy, not even after all these years. Quieter, huh? I don't exactly have a silent running mode. This crate groans louder than a dying star, just keeping the air circulating. She remained propped on her elbow, her gaze, or the direction of the light patterns on her face, fixed on him, unblinking. He felt a strange sort of pressure build between them, not the painful one from before, but something observational, intense. Like she was cataloging every detail of his physical and energetic being, seeing past the surface. The scent shifted again, a faint, almost sweet curiosity overriding the distress, layering over it. Your contained resonance. It has unusual pockets of turbulence, like small, contained storms, intense yet somehow stable within the containment. Kale shrugged, uncomfortable under her intense, alien scrutiny. Yeah, well, life's been a bit stormy. Comes with the job, comes with being human, I guess. He shifted his weight, the deck plating cold beneath his worn boots. This was getting too personal, too weird. He needed a plan. He couldn't leave her here to die in his cargo bay, but he couldn't keep her on the ship if his very existence was interfering with her healing. These turbulences, they are not random, they have patterns, like a language I almost recognize, she resonated, her voice filled with a strange fascination. The green patterns on her face sharpened further, resolving into complex, almost geometric shapes, rotating and shifting slowly, analyzing. It was utterly fascinating and deeply unsettling, this alien perception of his inner state. He felt a sudden, intense sensory input from her, not just the sight of the lights and the smell, but a tactile sensation, a faint buzzing in the air, a warmth he couldn't explain, a sense of his own energy field being mapped. It was like being surrounded by an invisible force field that pulsed with raw information he couldn't decode. The confined space of the cargo bay seemed to shrink further, charged with her alien presence, with her strange focus on his inner chaos. He realized with a jolt that he was no longer focused on his own safety, on getting rid of her, on escaping this sector. His attention was completely consumed by her, by the mystery of her nature, the strange beauty of her pain, the unsettling intensity of her focus on him. It was a potent, disorienting mix of fear, curiosity, and something that felt suspiciously like fascination, like being drawn into a vortex. He had expected danger, or maybe a negotiation for passage, but not this. Not this overwhelming sensory and emotional connection to something utterly alien, something that saw the universe reflected in his own messy existence. He just knelt there, watching her intricate, glowing patterns, breathing her strange, potent scent, caught in the web of her disrupted resonance, of her intense, alien observation. He had a feeling his simple salvage run had just become infinitely more complicated, and dangerous and strangely compelling. And despite the danger, a strange, unwelcome thrill ran through him, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. He was a scavenger used to picking over dead things, living a life in the shadows. She was vibrant, alive, and intensely, profoundly other, radiating light and energy. He was profoundly drawn to that light. He hadn't just found a piece of salvage. He had found something that was seeing him in a way no one ever had. The alien woman pushed herself up fully, sitting back against the stack of envirosuits. Her movements were still slow and careful, but stronger now, more deliberate. The sickly yellow lights were fading, replaced by a return of the dim blues and greens, though still not the vibrant intensity he'd seen in the corridor. The air still held the sharp note of distress, but it was receding, giving way to the complex floral scent, layered now with that potent curiosity and something new, something that made the air feel thick and heavy, like before a storm, charged with latent energy. The turbulence in your field. It continues, she resonated, her voice calmer though still tinged with weariness, with the echo of pain. Even when your form is still, it is fascinating. She lifted a hand, long-fingered, ending not in digits he recognized, but in flat, semi-translucent pads that glowed with a soft internal light, and extended it slowly towards him, tentatively, a gesture of pure, unadulterated curiosity. "May I examine it more closely?" Cale hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to recoil, to not let this alien, this creature of unknown energy fields and resonant connections, touch him again, especially after the disorienting intensity of their first brief contact. He knew nothing about her species, their abilities, their intentions. But the look of intense, focused curiosity in her light patterns, the sheer novelty of the gesture, held him in place. He lowered his pistol completely, letting it hang by his side, a useless weight. "Examine how, what will you do?" "Your field," she responded, her resonant voice soft but clear. She moved her hand closer, slowly, giving him ample time to pull away, to refuse the strange invitation. "My own is unstable, fractured, but yours, it is a contained system, turbulent, yes, chaotic, but stable in its turbulence. Perhaps contact, direct contact, could provide a momentary anchor for my own core, a stable frequency to align against." He looked at her hand, hovering in the space between them, radiating a soft, internal light. The glowing pads at the tips pulsed gently, like tiny, living stars. He thought about the searing pressure she'd exerted on his mind earlier, the disorientation, the pain. Was this safe? He didn't know. He knew nothing about her species, their abilities, their intentions. But the raw, exposed vulnerability he'd witnessed moments ago, combined with the sheer strangeness of her request, the utter lack of anything resembling human guile, was disarming. He was used to dealing with calculated threats, with things he could shoot or outsmart or run away from. This was outside his frame of reference entirely. He was a scavenger of physical objects. She was a scavenger of resonance and essence, and she was asking to examine his. All right," Cale said, his voice a little hoarse, surprising himself with the agreement. "Just don't do whatever you did out there. The head thing, the painful pressure." A faint ripple of blue-green light pulsed rapidly across the patterns on her face, a gesture he was beginning to associate with agreement, acknowledgement, a promise. Her hand continued its slow, deliberate approach. He held still, bracing himself, not knowing what to expect. Her glowing, pad-tipped fingers brushed against the back of his gloved hand, a touch light as a falling feather. It wasn't a touch he recognized. It felt warm, but also like a faint electrical current running through his skin, a vibration that resonated deep inside his bones, making them hum in response. The air around them seemed to thrum, and the strange scent intensified dramatically, becoming almost overpowering, intoxicating, a dizzying cocktail of ozone, moss, and that new, musky sweetness. He felt a sudden, dizzying influx of sensation, not just touch, but a complex wave of information that seemed to bypass his normal senses and hit him directly in his awareness, in his consciousness. He felt the presence of her core, a complex, vibrating energy at the center of her being, like a miniature star. He felt the disruption, the tear she mentioned, like a jagged edge of static electricity running through her form, a painful asymmetry. And he felt his own turbulence, magnified, illuminated, analyzed by her strange contact. It wasn't invasive or painful this time, but deeply intimate, like his own hidden landscape was being illuminated, explored by a foreign light, by an alien consciousness. He felt the scars, the old wounds he carried, not just physically but emotionally, resonating back at him through her touch, their frequencies exposed. It was startling, exposing, like having his most private thoughts broadcast to the world. Her hand tightened almost imperceptibly on his, a gentle pressure. The glowing patterns on her form flared with a sudden, intense burst of blue light, washing the small cargo bay in an ethereal glow, cold and deep. The resonant hum in his head rose in pitch, becoming a clear, ringing tone that vibrated through his whole body, making his teeth ache. The strange scent peaked, a dizzying cocktail of ozone, moss, and that sharp, metallic note, now overlaid with something rich and primal, like sun-warmed earth after rain, fertile and alive. "Your turbulence," Her resonant voice was louder now, clearer, filled with wonder, with awe. "It is magnificent, so chaotic yet contained, a universe unto itself, a symphony of contained disruption." Kale could only stare, breath held, caught in the overwhelming sensory flood. He felt utterly transparent, exposed, every secret thought, every buried emotion laid bare to this alien being. He hadn't just let her touch his hand. He felt like he'd let her touch his very soul, his deepest, most hidden core. It was terrifying and strangely exhilarating. He had lived so long keeping everything locked down, building impenetrable walls around his turbulent interior, keeping his true self hidden behind a facade of sarcasm and self-reliance. And now this alien creature, in her own moment of vulnerability, had just reached out and felt it all, seen it all, and called it magnificent. The air was thick with the energy flowing between them, the combined resonance of his chaotic human life field and her disrupted alien core, two disparate frequencies finding a sudden, unexpected harmony. He could feel his own heartbeat hammering, loud and frantic in his ears, a wild drum against the steady rhythm of her hum. Her touch wasn't just a physical sensation. It was an emotional and energetic connection, raw and immediate. He felt a powerful pull, a magnetic force drawing him closer, blurring the lines between their two vastly different forms, between human and alien, between physical and energetic. The cargo bay was no longer a cold metal box, but a crucible humming with unseen forces, thick with alien scent, illuminated by unearthly light. He didn't know what was happening, what this meant, but he knew, with a certainty that resonated deeper than her voice, that nothing was going to be the same after this. His life as a simple scavenger was over. He was tethered now, not to a dead station, but to this strange, powerful, broken creature who saw the universe in his scars, who found beauty in his chaos. Her grip on his hand tightened again, a deliberate pressure, and the intense blue light pulsing from her form seemed to draw him physically closer, pulled into her strange, radiant field, into the heart of her being. He was a scavenger, used to taking things. For the first time, he felt like he was being taken, pulled into something far larger, far stranger than himself. The intense blue light faded slowly, receding back into the intricate lines on her form, which now pulsed with a steady, deep blue, stronger than before, but still not the full vibrancy of their initial meeting. The ringing hum in Kale's head softened to a gentle thrum again, and the overpowering scent settled, still potent and complex, but no longer dizzying, no longer overwhelming. She released his hand, and the immediate, overwhelming sensory connection snapped, leaving him feeling strangely bereft, the air cold and empty where her touch had been, the silence heavy after the flood of sensation. The contact, it helped, she resonated, her voice calmer now, though still tinged with weariness, with the echo of the fracture. A temporary anchor, a point of stability against the disruption. "Thank you, Kale." Kale pulled his hand back, flexing his fingers, still tingling with that strange warmth and vibration. He felt off balance, like his internal compass had been spun around. His mind felt both clearer and more chaotic than before. "Temporary? What happens now? You gonna be okay?" "I must find isolation," she stated, pushing herself fully upright, sitting back against the stack of envirosuits. "To allow my core time to mend fully, to re-establish its own stable frequency." She looked around the cramped cargo bay, the blue light tracing her gaze over the stacked crates and equipment, the confined space. "This vessel, it provides shelter and its structure is intact, but your contained resonance, it is too near, too active, too complex." "Too active," Kale scoffed, though the edge was missing from his voice, replaced by a bewildered acceptance of the surreal. "I'm just standing here, breathing. What am I supposed to do? Turn myself off? Stop thinking?" A faint, almost imperceptible ripple of blue-green light crossed her face patterns, a flicker of alien amusement, or perhaps just a reaction to the absurdity of his question. "Your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, they create vibrations, resonance patterns, turbulence. To my core in this state, it is like constant noise, a complex, overwhelming signal." Kale rubbed a hand over his face, trying to make sense of this alien perception of reality. So you need me to? What? Be quiet, go into stasis, find a different ship. Ideally, distance, she responded. A place of absolute void where my field is not, bombarded by external resonance, but failing that. She paused, and the patterns on her face shifted, a rapid, complex play of green and faint yellow like data streams. He felt a spike of that intense curiosity again, stronger than before, focused entirely on him. Your turbulence. It is not just noise, it is structure, meaning it is compelling, unique, and perhaps a necessary element for my own understanding. He felt a blush rising under his skin, a flush he hadn't experienced in years, a physical manifestation of his discomfort and confusion. Compelling. His internal chaos was compelling to her. His mess was interesting. Glad you find my neuroses entertaining. Most people just find them annoying. The subtle green patterns on her face seemed to soften, the geometric shapes blurring slightly into smoother curves. Not entertaining, Kale. Instructive. Your species. Your ability to contain such intense, conflicting energies, such profound disruption within a fragile physical form. Your resilience in the face of internal and external storms. It is remarkable. Kale didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't remarkable, he was just Kale, a guy trying to scrape by in the void, haunted by his past. He felt like a collection of cracked pieces barely holding together, not a master of anything. Most of us just call it stress, or trauma, or just a bad day, he muttered. Her light patterns pulsed, a steady, rhythmic glow, a silent acknowledgement. Stress, yes, trauma, yes, but also resilience, and a capacity for deep resonance, for profound connection even when fractured. She looked at him again, and he felt that intense, focused awareness settle on him, not analyzing this time, but inviting. The air thickened again, not with distress or curiosity this time, but with something more fundamental. The scent deepened, becoming richer, warmer, carrying that primal, earthy note more strongly, like fertile soil waiting for seed. Perhaps proximity to your turbulence is not entirely detrimental, if I can learn to filter it, to isolate my core while observing yours, while learning from yours. Observing me, Kale felt a jolt of unease despite the lack of threat. This was moving too fast, getting too weird, too intimate. Like, watch me, see what I do. Not watching, her resonant voice was firm, patient. Experiencing, learning the texture of your contained chaos, the patterns of your emotional field. It is unique and perhaps a necessary study. He stared at her, mesmerized by the light, by the strange request. This was insane. He had a deeply injured, deeply alien being in his cargo bay who wanted to stay because his emotional baggage, his contained chaos, was fascinating to her fractured energy field, a subject of study. So what? You're just gonna hang out here in my cargo bay while I try to get back to civilization? A faint, soft blue light bloomed momentarily in the center of her chest, a subtle pulse, a gesture he was beginning to associate with. A scent, a gentle affirmation. If you allow until my core stabilizes, it requires proximity to a stable resonant field. Yours is turbulent, yes, but contained, predictable in its chaos. I have no other immediate recourse. The vessel is closed to me now. Its core resonance is hostile to my state, my own transport, lost in the transit. Fragmented. Lost in transit, fragmented, so she was stranded. Alone, just like him in a way. He looked at her, really looked past the alienness, the glowing patterns, the strange resonance. He saw a being in need, vulnerable and far from home. It mirrored something in himself, a deep, hidden ache of isolation, a longing for connection he rarely acknowledged. And when your core is stable, when you're not fractured anymore, then what? The green patterns on her face shifted, took on a faint, shimmering iridescence like light on water. Then, I must complete my original purpose, to reach my destination. It is tied to this sector. And now, perhaps your turbulence has shown me a new path to it, a new way to understand the resistance I faced. My turbulence? How? Kale asked, bewildered by the leap in logic. Your ability to survive in chaos, To carry the scars, the disruptions, yet continue. To integrate the fragmentation, she resonated, the words profound in their simplicity. My species. We seek harmony, pure resonance. We avoid turbulence. We seek stillness for reintegration, but perhaps survival, true survival in a chaotic universe, requires embracing a certain amount of it, learning to navigate it, to find pattern in its disruption as you do. You are an example. She extended her hand again, not for physical contact this time, but in a gesture that felt like an offering, a request, an invitation to a shared journey. Will you allow me to learn? Will you accept my presence? Kale looked from her extended hand to her face, watching the intricate, swirling patterns of light that conveyed a depth of being, a consciousness he couldn't comprehend, yet felt profoundly drawn to. He was a scavenger. His life was simple: find things, sell things, survive. He avoided complications, especially ones that involved powerful, injured aliens who felt his emotions like static and saw his internal chaos as a lesson. This was utterly illogical, undeniably dangerous, and completely against every rule he lived by, every defense he had erected. But sitting here in the quiet of his ship with this strange, glowing being who felt like a living embodiment of raw emotion and energy, the barriers felt less solid. Maybe talking about it to something utterly alien, something that wouldn't judge or pity or try to fix him, something that saw his brokenness as a structure to be observed, wasn't so bad. Maybe it was even necessary. He felt a strange pull, a need to articulate the chaos she seemed to find so compelling, to share the landscape of his interior world. The space between them felt charged, not with threat, but with a profound, unusual intimacy, a potential for connection he had never anticipated. He was about to open a door he'd kept sealed for a long, long time, and he was about to do it for an alien woman he'd met mere cycles ago. It was insane. And yet he found himself taking a breath, looking back at her glowing face and beginning to speak. He started with the easy stuff, the practical turbulence of scavenging, the near misses, the hunger, the cold, the constant struggle for resources. Then slowly, haltingly, he started to excavate deeper, revealing the cracks in his own core, the places where the fragmentation had almost taken hold, the moments where the chaos threatened to consume him entirely. He spoke of loss, of betrayal, of the cold, empty spaces left behind by those who were gone. He watched as her light patterns shifted, changed color, pulsed and flowed in response to his words, a silent, alien language of understanding and observation, of absorption. The scent in the air changed too, subtly reflecting the mood of his stories, growing richer, more complex, layered with unexpected notes of what? Shared experience, recognition, acknowledgement of shared pain. The barrier he'd set up between them felt less physical, more permeable, dissolving in the face of this unprecedented exchange, this raw, mutual vulnerability. He was laying himself bare, not to a person, but to a field of resonant energy and light patterns, and it felt both terrifyingly vulnerable and strangely safe, held within the sphere of her calm, radiant presence. The silence between his halting sentences was filled only by the low thrum of her presence and the gentle pulse of her glowing form, a constant, patient anchor in the sudden storm of his unearthed emotions. The cargo bay, once a symbol of his solitary, functional life, had become a space of unexpected, profound connection, illuminated by the raw, alien light of mutual revelation. He was sharing his chaos, and she was receiving it, transforming it into understanding, into light. Kale talked for a long time, longer than he'd spoken consecutively in years, maybe longer than he'd spoken about himself ever. He talked about the job that went wrong, the partner who didn't make it out, the quiet descent into solitary scavenging, the choice to disappear into the anonymity of the void. He talked about the loneliness, the way the void could eat at you if you let it, filling the empty spaces inside. He talked about the constant, low-level fear that was the background hum of his life, the hypervigilance, the inability to fully relax. As he spoke, he watched her. Her glowing patterns didn't just reflect his words. They seemed to actively interpret them, to resonate with them on a fundamental level. The greens on her face shifting from intricate geometry to soft, undulating waves of understanding, the blues on her limbs deepening or lightening in response to the weight of his narrative, the darkness he spoke of. The scent she emitted flowed with the rhythm of his story, sometimes sharp with past tension, sometimes soft with melancholy, sometimes gaining that strange, earthy richness that made his head spin, a scent that felt like deep, fertile ground capable of supporting life, even after burning. When he finally fell silent, the cargo bay was steeped in a heavy, comfortable stillness, thick with the residual scent of his unveiled past and her steady, accepting presence. He felt raw, exposed, like he'd peeled back layers he hadn't even realized were there. But also lighter, as if some of the contained turbulence had found an outlet, an understanding listener who wasn't even human, who processed his pain not as a burden, but as data, as structure. She was silent for a long moment after he finished. Her light patterns settled into a state of quiet observation, soft blues and gentle greens, a calm, steady glow. The resonant hum in his head was a low, soothing frequency, like a peaceful vibration deep within him. The air smelled overwhelmingly of that deep, earthy richness, a scent that felt grounding, comforting, a silent reassurance. Your turbulence, it is born of fracture, she finally resonated, her voice soft, the hum vibrating directly in his awareness. Like my own core, the tearing, the loss, the isolation, but yours, it has found a way to contain the break, to function despite it, to build walls around the damage. It is remarkable containment. Is that what you're trying to do? Kale asked, feeling a sudden kinship with her in their shared state of being fractured, of carrying deep breaks within. Contain your break, rebuild your core. Yes, she confirmed. The light in her form pulsed gently, a soft beat. To mend the core, to integrate the violence of separation, to find a new stillness, a new harmony after the tear, your resilience. It is a path I had not considered for my own kind. We avoid fragmentation at all costs, seek only pure, uninterrupted resonance. Perhaps to our detriment, perhaps some forms of fragmentation, some disruptions, are necessary for growth, for adaptation. He didn't know how to respond to that. Necessary fragmentation. It sounded painful. It was painful. His life was proof of that. She shifted again, drawing her legs up slightly, becoming more compact. And this time she extended her hand towards him across the invisible line between them, her glowing fingertips reaching into his space, radiating soft light and warmth. It was a gesture of invitation, tentative but clear, a silent question hanging in the air. The observation has been illuminating, Kale, for my core, for my understanding. May we continue this shared experience, this contact. Kale hesitated for only a second. His rational mind screamed caution, screamed to stay away, to maintain distance. But his gut, his heart, his very being was drawn to her, to the promise of connection, to the acceptance she offered. He walked around the invisible barrier he had set up and knelt beside her, closer than before, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her form, to breathe in the full complexity of her scent. He reached out and took her hand in his rough, calloused fingers closing gently around her smooth, glowing one. This time, the contact wasn't a jolt of information or a dizzying wave of sensation. It was softer, a gentle flow of warmth and that familiar, subtle, resonant vibration, a comfortable hum. The air thickened instantly with her potent scent, that rich earthiness dominant now, laced with a subtle sweetness that made his breath catch, made his senses reel in a different way than before, not from fear but from anticipation. Her glowing patterns intensified slowly, not with the sharp, intense light from before, but with a deep, pulsating warmth, blues and greens melting into softer shades, swirling and mingling across her skin, like slow, deep currents. He felt her presence settle over him, not as an analysis this time, but as a deep, mutual awareness, a shared space of being. It was less about observing his turbulence and more about merging their disrupted fields, finding a shared frequency, a harmonic vibration. "What is this?" Kale asked, his voice low, husky, barely a whisper. "Resonance," she replied, her resonant voice a mere whisper in his mind, yet somehow louder than sound, filling his awareness. "Shared, Not observation, Kale, connection, a joining. He felt the connection deepen, flowing between their joined hands, spreading through his body, meeting her energy field. It wasn't sexual, not yet, but it was profoundly intimate, a merging of essences, a recognition on a level far deeper than words or physical form. He felt the edges of his own contained turbulence soften, not erased, but accepted, integrated into the larger field of their shared resonance, held within its warmth. He felt her fractured core beside his own, two broken things finding a strange, unexpected wholeness in proximity, in contact. The scent was almost overwhelming now, purely primal, a heady mix of earth and ozone and something else entirely, something that spoke of fertile ground and raw energy, of life burgeoning in the darkness. Her light patterns shifted again, resolving into fluid, sensuous curves, radiating a soft, inviting warmth that drew him in. The air was thick with unspoken understanding, with a shared vulnerability that transcended species and culture, physical form and energetic state. He felt the pull towards her intensify, becoming unmistakably physical now, a deep ache of longing that had nothing to do with observation and everything to do with the fundamental need for closeness, for belonging. He looked at her face, at the luminous patterns that seemed to draw him in, pulling him deeper into her light, and for the first time he felt a sense of profound peace in the midst of chaos, in the heart of his own storm. They were both broken, both adrift, but here, in the small, dim cargo bay of his rusting ship, they were finding a connection that felt more real, more stable, more essential than anything either of them had ever known. His hand tightened around hers, a silent affirmation, a yielding to the inevitable pull, to the strange, powerful bond that had formed between them. The void outside the ship felt infinitely far away. All that existed was the intimate space between them, humming with shared resonance and the promise of something new and utterly unknown. He leaned closer, drawn by her light, her scent, the silent language of her being, the acceptance in her gaze. He was a scavenger who found value in discarded things. Perhaps she was finding value in him. The intense golden light slowly receded, softening back into a warm glow that traced Lyra's form. The air in the tunnel cooled slightly, the overpowering muskiness of her scent dispersing, leaving a lingering sweetness that clung to Kale's skin, to his clothes, a silent memory of what had passed. They remained pressed together in the narrow space, breathless, trembling, the resonance between them a gentle pulse now, like a shared heartbeat. Kale rested his forehead against hers, feeling the faint vibration of her still accelerated resonant field through his skin. He could feel the dampness on his skin, the sweat born of exertion and sheer, overwhelming sensation. His mind struggled to process what had just happened, to fit it into any framework of his understanding, and failed completely. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice raw, rough with emotion. "Resonance," she whispered, her voice a soft hum directly in his awareness, vibrating through his skull, through his chest. "Amplified, concentrated, generative, necessary, my core. It accepts the flow. The fractured frequency is integrated." Necessary. He understood, not intellectually, but on a deeper level. In the face of the cold, mechanical threat outside, they had generated their own heat, their own light, their own powerful, disruptive resonance. It felt like a defiance, an affirmation of life and connection in a place of death and isolation, a creation born of shared vulnerability and urgent need. He pulled back slightly, looking at her face in the soft golden light. The intricate green patterns had returned, but they were different now, softer, more fluid, permanently altered by the intensity of their shared experience, flowing like gentle streams of light. Her light patterns seemed to radiate a quiet contentment, a deep peace that settled over the small, cramped space. "The borders," Lyra resonated softly. "They passed. They did not detect our resonance. The disruption was effective." Effective. He had sacrificed his ship's functionality, faced down armed boarders, hidden in a cramped tunnel, and merged with an alien woman on a level he couldn't begin to explain, generating a blast of raw energy that had broken their attackers. All of it effective. The word felt inadequate, yet it was the only one that seemed to fit the raw, chaotic sequence of events. He felt a sudden weariness settle over him, physical and emotional. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by the heavy weight of their situation. Dead ship, hostile enemy somewhere on board, no way out. Or at least no easy way. "What now?" Cale asked, the question hanging in the quiet air between them. "We're still trapped, still adrift." Lyra reached out, her glowing hand resting on his cheek again, the light warm against his skin. The touch was gentle, reassuring. "The power core, we must reach it. My core can attempt to reintegrate the vessel's systems, provide limited function, enough to, perhaps, send a distress signal or activate localized defenses, to make the vessel a stable entity once more." "If we can get to it," Cale said, remembering the boarder's stated intent to search the aft sections, where the power core was located. They were moving into the most dangerous part of the ship, the enemy's current position. "We move when their search pattern is distant," Lyra hummed, her voice steady. "Your knowledge of the vessel, it is our advantage. The hidden pathways, the maintenance conduits, the places they cannot easily follow." Cale nodded. His years of exploring derelicts, learning their layouts, their weak points, their forgotten passages, their service tunnels, it had all led to this. His scavenging life, which felt so small and insignificant compared to her cosmic purpose, her battle against exploitation, was suddenly vital, providing the practical knowledge they needed. His turbulence, his understanding of chaos, of navigating broken, dangerous places, was their key to survival. They waited in the dark tunnel, listening intently, their breathing quiet. The sounds of the boarders receded further, their heavy footsteps growing faint in the distance, their voices muffled by the ship's bulkheads. They were deep in the aft sections now, likely near the power core, following their search pattern. "Now," Cale whispered, pushing open the maintenance hatch carefully, peering out into the darkened corridor beyond. The air outside the tunnel was cold, still. Lyra emerged beside him, her golden light casting an ethereal glow on the dusty deck plates, illuminating their path. They moved cautiously through the ship's skeletal structure, a silent, glowing pair in the heart of darkness, two different forms united by a shared purpose, a shared resonance. Cale led the way, navigating by instinct and memory, relying on his intimate knowledge of the rust bucket's worn-out anatomy, Lyra moving beside him, her resonant hum a constant presence in his awareness, a guide and a shield. The air carried her soft, sweet scent, a quiet reassurance in the cold, dark corridors. They moved through access ways too narrow for the armored boarders, climbed through ventilation shafts, crawled through tight spaces, relying on Cale's knowledge of the ship's hidden anatomy. Cale's body protested the exertion, his muscles aching, his lungs burning in the cold air. But he pushed through it, driven by the need to protect Lyra, to get them to the power core, to find a way out of this impossible situation. Lyra seemed tireless, moving with a fluid grace that belied her earlier vulnerability, her fractured state. Her light remained steady, a quiet source of strength, a constant beacon in the darkness. Her scent, that lingering sweetness, was a constant, subtle reassurance, a connection to the life and warmth she embodied. They reached the access tunnel leading to the main engineering section. Cale paused, listening intently. Silence. The boarders were either gone or waiting in ambush. "They should be finished sweeping this area by now," Cale whispered, the silence feeling heavy, expectant. "Unless they found something, or they're waiting for us." Lyra's light patterns rippled with a faint blue, a sign of caution, of heightened awareness. "Their search may be complete, or they anticipate our arrival. The power core. It is a logical destination for one seeking to re-establish the vessel's resonance. They may have deduced your purpose." "Only one way to find out," Cale said grimly, tightening his grip on his pistol. He opened the tunnel hatch, slipping out into the engineering section, his senses on high alert. It was a massive, cavernous space, filled with the silent, imposing forms of dead machinery, hulking shapes in the gloom. The air was cold, still, carrying the faint, stale smell of ozone from the energy blast. Lyra followed him out, her golden light illuminating the heart of the ship, casting their shadows across the deck plating. The main power core stood at the center of the section, a colossal structure of defunct conduits and control panels, silent and dark. It was the heart of the ship, and it was dead. "Okay," Kale said, moving towards the core, scanning the space for any sign of movement. "We need to access the primary control node. See if I can initiate a low-power boot sequence. You, do your resonance thing. See if you can stabilize its field, re-establish its primary frequency." Lyra nodded, moving towards the base of the core, her steps silent. As she approached, her golden light intensified, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm, reaching out towards the dormant machinery like tendrils of pure energy. He felt her resonant hum rise, a powerful, focused energy directed at the core, a silent command. Kale climbed onto a service platform near the core's base, accessing a control panel. He opened it, exposing a tangle of dusty wires and defunct components, the remnants of the ship's complex systems. He pulled out his multi-tool, his hands working on instinct, years of scavenging and repair guiding his movements, trying to find the right sequence, the right connections, to breathe life back into the dead heart of the ship. He worked in the soft golden light, the only sounds the faint hum of Lyra's resonance and his own ragged breathing, the click of his tools. He could feel her presence beside him, a pillar of calm energy in the chaotic task, an anchor in the storm of wires and connections. Their shared resonance, forged in the cargo bay, amplified in the maintenance tunnel, was with them now, a silent partner in their struggle, a force guiding their actions. He felt a faint vibration run through the platform, a subtle shift in the air pressure, a resonance returning. Lyra's golden light pulsed stronger, reaching out, wrapping around the core like a golden cloak. He heard a low hum different from hers, emanating from the core itself, a sign of nascent energy stirring within the dead systems, a response to her touch. "It responds," Lyra resonated, her voice filled with quiet triumph with wonder. "The core's field. It accepts my resonance. It is beginning to reintegrate, to pulse once more." "Keep going," Kale urged, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked on the panel, trying to coax a response from the dormant systems. He felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. Maybe they could do this. Maybe they could bring the ship back to life, make it their home, their escape once more. Then the air chilled. A new sound echoed in the vast engineering section, the heavy metallic footsteps of the boarders, closer this time, too close. They were here. "They found us," Kale said, his voice tight, dropping his multi-tool with a clatter that sounded deafening in the quiet section. He pulled out his pistol, his hand steady. Lyra's golden light flared, brilliant and sudden, chasing away the shadows. Her resonant hum rose to a sharp, defensive pitch, a warning. The air crackled with tension, with latent energy. "They seek the core's re-established resonance," Lyra pulsed, her voice urgent. "It is a powerful signal to their instruments, a beacon we have activated." Kale scrambled back from the panel, taking cover behind a large conduit, pistol raised, scanning the entrance points to the section. Lyra stood near the base of the core, her glowing form a radiant shield, a target. Two armored figures emerged from the shadows at the far end of the section, their weapons raised, aiming directly at Lyra, their focus absolute. "Target locked," the synthesized voice rasped from the lead figure. "Resonance signature confirmed, high energy reading, capture protocol initiated, secure the core." "Not happening," Kale muttered, firing his pistol. The energy bolt streaked across the section, impacting the wall near one of the boarders, sending up sparks. They scattered, taking cover behind structural supports, but their weapons remained trained on Lyra. Lyra didn't move from the core. Instead, she extended her hands, not towards the boarders but towards the core itself, a gesture of command, of connection. A wave of pure golden energy pulsed outwards from her, slamming into the massive structure, channeling her own energy, amplified by the core's nascent power. The power core responded with a surge of raw energy, a deep groan that vibrated through the deck plates. Lights flickered on across the section, emergency lighting casting long, stark shadows, illuminating the battleground. Machinery groaned and whirred to life, protesting its sudden reawakening, filling the air with sound. Localized reintegration, Lyra resonated, her voice amplified by the sudden surge of energy filling the vast space. Limited systems online, core field stable, defenses possible. Defenses. Kale yelled over the growing noise of the reawakening ship, dodging a blast from one of the boarders. The core's energy field, it can be directed, focused. Lyra's golden light pulsed rapidly, her form vibrating with the sheer power she was channeling, a conductor of cosmic energy. The boarders, momentarily stunned by the lights and the sudden noise, advanced cautiously, their weapons sweeping the section, looking for Kale for Lyra. They saw Lyra standing near the core, radiating power, a beacon they could not ignore. Disrupt the core, one of them ordered, his voice a mechanical bellow. Neutralize the resonant source, kill the alien. They raised their weapons, aiming at Lyra, ready to fire, their movements precise, deadly. Kale fired again, trying to draw their attention to give her space, but their focus was locked on her, the source of the disruptive resonance. Lyra extended her hands again, her golden light flaring to an unbearable intensity, a supernova in the heart of the ship. The resonant hum she emitted rose to a deafening crescendo, vibrating through Kale's very bones, through the ship's frame, a wave of pure, concentrated force. Then a wave of raw energy, pure golden light and resonant force, erupted from the power core, directed outwards by Lyra, focused by her will, channeled through her being. It slammed into the two boarders. They didn't explode, didn't disintegrate, didn't burn. Instead, their armored forms seemed to shimmer, to distort, their edges blurring, their solid forms losing coherence. Their weapons sparked and died, inert in their hands. Their movements became jerky, erratic, like puppets whose strings had been violently severed, their internal systems failing. Sympathetic vibration, Lyra resonated, her voice strained but triumphant, echoing in the section. Their structured resonance, disrupted by chaotic frequency, their form, unstable, undone. The boarders collapsed, twitching on the floor, their armor rippling, their synthesized voices emitting distorted mechanical screams, fatting into whimpers. Their forms were still intact, physically, but fundamentally broken, vibrating on a frequency they couldn't contain, their internal coherence shattered by her directed resonance. Kale stared, stunned, lowering his pistol slowly. She hadn't destroyed them with brute force. She had undone them, reduced them to vibrating, incoherent messes by disrupting their fundamental resonance. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring, a power beyond his wildest imagination. Lyra swayed, her golden light dimming, her form trembling with exhaustion, the immense effort taking its toll. Kale rushed to her side, catching her as she stumbled. "Lyra, are you okay? You used too much power." "The channeling, it is draining," she resonated weakly, leaning against him, her form warm against his side. "But the core, it is stable, reintegrated partially. Enough." The engineering section was still alive with the low hum of the partially functioning core, the flickering emergency lights. The boarders were incapacitated, neutralized by a form of warfare Kale couldn't comprehend, a demonstration of alien power rooted in the fabric of reality itself. They were safe, for now. He helped Lyra sit down against the base of the core, her golden light a faint pulse against the cold metal, a fragile beacon. He sat beside her, pulling her close, exhaustion washing over him, but a different exhaustion than before, one tinged with adrenaline and the lingering physical sensation of their bond, of their shared resonant explosion. They had survived. Together. His knowledge of the ship, her power over resonance, they had combined to overcome the threat, to create a shield from the storm. He looked at the incapacitated boarders, their forms still rippling faintly, their silent screams echoing in his memory. He looked at Lyra, her glowing form a picture of exhausted power, leaning against him. He looked around the resurrected engineering section of his dead ship. His life had been turned upside down, his ship broken and remade, disabled and partially revived in a single, chaotic cycle. He was stranded but not alone. He was tied to an alien woman by a bond forged in turbulence and resonance, a bond that had just saved their lives, that had defeated an enemy he couldn't have faced alone. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and utterly, irrevocably intertwined with hers. The vast, cold void outside felt less daunting now, knowing he wasn't facing it alone, that their shared resonance was a shield against the darkness, a source of unpredictable power. The low hum of the partially active power core filled the engineering section, a sign of fragile life within the dead ship, a rhythmic beat in the silence. Emergency lights cast a dim, flickering glow, making the shadows dance. Kale sat beside Lyra, her glowing form radiating a soft, steady golden light, her resonant hum a low, comforting vibration against his side, a constant presence in his awareness. She was still weak, the effort of channeling the core's energy visible in the faintness of her glow, the slight tremor in her form, but she was recovering. Kale had salvaged components from the wrecked cockpit console, connecting them to a functional auxiliary panel in engineering. He managed to bring up a limited sensor feed and communications array. Enough, maybe, to send a weak distress signal. Enough, maybe, to find help, or draw more unwanted attention from those who sought to exploit Lyra's kind. "I can try sending a signal," Kale said, looking at the flickering screen, the sparse data streams. "But it'll be weak, and it might tell their friends where we are. Their command will know these units failed." Lyra was silent for a moment, her light patterns flowing in slow, thoughtful curves across her face, conveying a deep consideration. The air around her carried a scent of calm resolve, layered with that lingering sweetness that always seemed to bloom when she was at peace. Sending a signal is a form of projecting resonance, Kale, a focused frequency signature. It can be tracked, exploited by those attuned to it. "So we wait?" Kale asked, the idea of passive helplessness grating on him. He was a man of action, of movement, of making his own way. "We assess," she resonated, her voice quiet but firm. "The ship holds. The core provides minimal function, sufficient for life support, for limited detection. We are hidden, invisible to their resonant tracking now that the core is unstable once more. For now, the immediate threat is neutralized." She gestured with a glowing hand towards the twitching, incapacitated forms of the boarders, still trapped in their vibrating torment. "They will recover eventually, but their instruments are irrevocably disrupted. Their capacity for resonant detection is broken. They cannot fulfill their purpose here. They are stranded with us." "They'll report back," Kale said, stating the obvious, the logical next step in any military or corporate operation. "Their command will send more units, stronger units." "Perhaps," Lyra conceded, her light patterns rippling like faint uncertainty. "Or perhaps the disruption was significant enough to deter them, to make this prize too costly, too unpredictable, our combined resonance. It is a chaotic signal they cannot process, a disruption they cannot predict." She looked at him, her light patterns shifting, resolving into shapes that conveyed a deep, quiet strength, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of conflict. "Our shared resonance, Kale. It is not just a shield, it is a weapon, unconventional, disruptive to structured power, and it is born of your chaos, your contained turbulence." A weapon. His chaotic, contained turbulence combined with her generative resonance, her inherent connection to fundamental forces. An unpredictable, disruptive force against structured, exploitative power. It was an alien concept, one he would never have conceived of, yet it felt right, a truth expressed not in logic, but in feeling, in resonance, in the powerful, overwhelming experience they had shared. He looked around the resurrected engineering section. It wasn't much, just enough to keep the lights on, the air breathable, the core humming weakly. But it was theirs. A tiny pocket of life and light in a dead ship, adrift in the vast, cold void, their sanctuary. "Okay," Kale said, turning from the auxiliary console, his decision made. "No signal, not yet. We conserve power, we wait, see what happens. Let the chaos settle." Lyra nodded, her golden light pulsing with approval, with understanding. A strategy of resilience, adapting to the environment, utilizing limited resources, navigating the storm within the stillness. "That's the scavenger way," Kale said, a faint smile touching his lips, a genuine smile this time, not tinged with bitterness or sarcasm. He was still a scavenger, yes, but he was scavenging for more than just scrap metal now. He was scavenging for survival, for meaning, for connection, for a future he couldn't have imagined cycles ago. He settled back against the core, drawing his knees up to his chest, finding a comfortable position on the cold deck plating. Lyra remained seated beside him, her golden glow a warm, steady presence against his side, her resonant hum a low, continuous thread of sound that vibrated through him, grounding him. The silence returned, but it was a different silence than before, not the oppressive quiet of death, but the quiet hum of fragile life, of shared presence, of a universe beginning to unfold between two disparate beings. He looked at her, at the soft golden light, the intricate, flowing patterns on her face, illuminated by the weak emergency lights. He thought back to their meeting, the confusing hum, the alien scent, the initial fear and mistrust. He thought about the crash in his cargo bay, the hesitant offer of help, the profound, disorienting contact that had exposed him, that had healed her. He thought about their shared vulnerabilities, his scars and her fractures, and how they had found strength in each other, how his chaos had anchored her, how her light had illuminated him. He thought about the raw, overwhelming intensity of their merging in the dark tunnel, a connection that went beyond flesh and form, touching something fundamental in both of them, creating something new, something resonant. He didn't understand everything about her species, her culture, her purpose, her fight against the exploiters. He didn't understand the mechanics of resonance, of cores, of generative merging, not intellectually, but he understood the feeling of not being alone anymore, the feeling of finding an anchor in his own chaos, the feeling of a bond forged in shared danger and profound intimacy, a bond that felt more real, more lasting than anything he had ever known. Lyra shifted slightly, leaning her head against his shoulder, her movement slow and deliberate, an act of trust, of intimacy. Her golden light pulsed gently against his skin through the fabric of his jacket. The scent in the air was soft now, purely sweet, a quiet promise of peace and presence. "We are adrift," Lyra resonated softly, her voice a peaceful hum against his ear, a vibration that settled deep within him. "The vessel is inert, but we are, together, our resonance. It is a new frequency in the void, undetectable, unique, a contained universe of two. Unique like them. A human scavenger and an alien exile, stranded on a dead ship, bound by a connection that defied logic and language, that transcended physical reality, but resonated with a truth deeper than the stars. Two different species, two fractured beings, finding wholeness in each other's presence." Kale closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her light, the comfort of her presence, wash over him, settling deep in his bones. They were in the heart of the storm, the chaos was still around them, but they were facing it together, their resonant frequencies intertwined. His life wasn't about mere survival anymore. It was about living, with her, navigating the chaos, finding the resonance, building a new beginning from the broken pieces of their pasts, from the dead shell of his ship. The future was uncertain, a vast, dark canvas stretching before them, filled with unknown dangers. But as he sat there in the quiet hum of the resurrected core, with Lyra's golden light a warm presence beside him, he knew they would face it together. Whatever came next, whatever the void held, they would meet it as one, their shared resonance a beacon in the darkness, their bond a foundation against the storm, a new life force pulsing in the silence. The great, cold silence of space felt less empty now. It felt like possibility, it felt like home.